Hello. God, you'd think I was a werewolf or something. I'm on again. Time Agent Brendan. I've got to be careful here, right? Time Agent Brendan here in another downtown saloon with another decoded message for your analysis and observation. I'm risking my life to tell you this news. Anyone in this tawdry saloon could be bugging me or stalking me to report back to Bad Wolf. Good to see you, but ensure you encode your messages in the thread so we are not intercepted, okay? So, here we go. Bigger, madder, darker, wilder show we got promised by the great RTD. I'm quoting Russell T Davies, our showrunner, from the latest Doctor Who magazine, offering his latest thoughts, and I think anyone with a semblance of intelligence can glean much more than he is actually saying, given a moment's thought. So get a drink. Here we go. All right. Right. So here we go with RTD's rambling rhetoric. I will read the tea leaves in between and see what we think. So one of the quotes he had was, the show in 2025 is going to be bigger and madder and darker, taking wilder swings than ever. I'm confident that Doctor Who is forever. The future is bright. Okay, got your drink? Let's take this apart. Right. Okay. Right. He's doing a lot of superlatives here, and I'm going to decode each one. First one is, and we'll look at bigger and we'll look at madder in particular in a moment, and I've got evidence to link up with that. The darker one, I approve. I don't know about you, I approve. If Doctor Who was darker, I don't mean in the Andrew Cartmel nonsense, I mean really darker. I think they're missing a trick, and they always have been. The trouble is, I don't think I actually quite believe that it's going to go dark. If it is, I will change my philosophy and I will believe. So if he says the show in 2025 is going to be darker, he gets a tick from me. And I think actually a lot of you would say the same thing, because Doctor Who getting you behind the settee, getting you scared, giving kids nightmares in a nice way, getting the adrenaline rushing is what we want. And actually it's been lacking. So the darker one I approve of. Now let's take a look at the other stuff. Now when he says wilder swings than ever, what, wilder swings than ever? I really don't. I hope you don't mean breaking the fourth wall. And I've got evidence to have a look at some other tasty morsels he said. So taking wilder swings than ever, does that mean break formula? Does that mean break canon? Does that mean break some of the rules? Does that just mean break the formula because you're bored? That bit concerns me. So darker, tick, taking a wilder swing than ever. Why? Why? There's my question. Why do we need to be wilder than any other TV program? Why do we need to be wilder than any Doctor Who before? I would have thought after the Chris Chibnall years, we want some calm, some reassurance, some common sense, some safe stories. Wilder than ever? No, that's because you're bored. Why do you need to do anything more than any other show? Wallace and Gromit, Gavin and Stacey, Silent Witness all present what people expect. I don't think their producers say something is bigger or wilder. They just try and keep the level high and professional and consistent. And that is the key. And I don't like that superlative wilder, but I do like the superlative darker. So there's my point there. Now, just before I move on to the other two superlatives, where I've got plenty of evidence, let me point this out. I am confident that Doctor Who is forever. Now, that statement is a bit woolly, isn't it? If you really think about what he's saying there, it already is going to be forever. It's in our minds. It's in our memory. That's how I think he's talking here. And I have to say, I think it's got an element of bravado. And I think that element of bravado is whatever comes next, we'll always have this. It's a little bit like that. That's what I hear. The future is bright. Well, whatever. We'll soon see. I think what I can hear is somebody trying to sound confident, trying to sound as though he's got the ship right. I'm not too sure. I'm not reading too much further into it. I just think it's empty. It's bluster. What I am going to look at, though, is the superlative bigger and the superlative madder. Now, let's have a look at a bit more evidence. When he says that, let me go big screen so you can actually have half a chance to see things. When he says madder, what I worry about is, does he mean gay? Now, remember, I'm a gay man. Or does he mean camper? Remember, the Bad Wolf team said that 1980s turned into, lowbrow entertainment. It was silly and it was pastiche. So I hope he's not going down that road of saying, let's make it very camp. He's already said season one's very camp. He said, you can see at the very bottom of the second one, he says, no one's ever asked me to step back from white and creamness into the series. It doesn't even feel particularly queer to me. It just feels natural. Well, we know what season one looked like. We know what the Star Beast looked like, etc., etc. So the point is, I'm not too impressed that saying something's going to be madder actually means it's going to be anything decent. Now, on top of that, when he said madder, he uses that verb. He uses that adjective and he uses that noun in lots of different ways. And they all worry me. Now, this was a statement he gave May in 2024. So, of course, he's consistent in one respect. It's kind of raised, it's allowed a madness and a freedom. He thinks going fantasy with Doctor Who means he can go and play into some madness. I find that character more terrifying for the Doctor because the Doctor is very used to finding out the rules, working out the rules, and then using those rules against his enemy. So, is that what he means by the series is going to be madder? Does he mean camper, or does he mean it's just going to lay into that pantheon of gods? Lots of fantasy. It's madder because there's no rules. It's hocus pocus. It might be very silly. And that has my question mark and my concern there. By the way, Thread, I'll join you in a minute. I'll just get this section done, right? So, again, on the madder, on the bigger now. So I think he means fantasy. On the bigger one, well, Bad Wolf, they've all had a go at this. It was a year ago. Look at that, May 2024. Doctor Who was primed to be bigger than ever. Now, the bigger superlative to me is saying that the Bad Wolf team are ambitious. That's a possibility. It could be meaning, and I'll go on to this one now, it could mean that they actually want it to be more than British. Because if you look at the statement at the bottom, I've highlighted it. Doctor Who will always be and must be a quintessentially British programme. Okay, says Julie Gardner. It's British, but it's always been universal. And then right at the bottom, she says, it's British at its core, but it's bigger than that. So when he says it's going to be bigger and madder, you can see I've got a fair few kind of question marks here about what that might mean. Again, we've used the adjective again. He says in that second paragraph there, I don't talk about coming back because it's a new show. Doctor Who fan whose first memory of life is of the series. I wanted the show to be bigger. I wanted to take the show forward. I wanted this to be a big streamer. So, right, let's just get it in a nutshell. Madder, more fantasy, no rules. Don't expect any sense in the next series. I think that's what that means. Bigger, yeah, they want to keep going global. Bigger than being a British quintessential show. In other words, it's not going to follow many of the rules we expected from before. Darker, tick, although I don't believe that darker is the same definition I have. And of course, wilder will probably just mean it's going to break rules, song and dance, breaking fourth wall. I've got evidence, don't you worry. So that's my first kind of contention. Now let's just look at another element that he said, and then I'm going to really look at the thread and have a good chat to you all. Okay, so bear with me for a moment, folks. He also says, and I've listed it this time, he says in the Doctor Who magazine, he says, monsters, old faces, lore, pantheons, friends, legacy, myth, beasts, quarries, spaceships, cameos, robots, rebels, shocks, songs, lasers, Mrs. Flood. It's a hell of a list. And when you look at the list, there's a few things there where I think most Doctor Who fans will go, tick. Quarries, for example. Spaceships, for example. You know, you could suddenly be in Nightmare on Eden, couldn't we? Robots, yep, I can buy into that. Monsters, yep. Now, when RTD says some of the other criteria there, I do start to worry. And unlike last year when I would have gone, yeah, I'm now starting to think, right, I'm more cynical and I've got more questions. So shall we go through the questions? Then I'll talk to the thread. So when he says monsters, okay, yeah, as long as it's not a bogey monster, yeah. Shall we raise the stakes a bit more than that? Old faces. Now, old faces is an interesting one because old faces could be Kate Stewart, because you know how he does it. It could just mean that Ruby Sunday's back. Old faces could mean Rogue's back, right? It could mean, well, Mrs. Flood's in it again, because we're in the know, but most punters out there wouldn't be. So old faces could just mean somebody from season 1. But I also will say for a second, it could be somebody like Tegan. Okay, now I'll link up to Tegan in a moment. But just let me carry on for a second, and then, like I said, we'll talk. Law. Now, he uses the word law, he uses the word myth, and he uses the word, legacy. Now, they all mean slightly different things. So when he says there's going to be lots of monsters, old faces, and law, that means traditional knowledge, background info accepted by fans. So what? He's going to burrow into our classic, is he? Okay. Myth, I dare say, I'm sure you're thinking the same thing. Myth is going to be the pantheon of gods, maybe the Mara. That's why I said Tegan, because he mentioned the Mara. I have a funny feeling that the Mara is something they could do, a bit like Sutek, God help us. And therefore, we've already had Tegan back once. She might be a cameo. He says cameo there, but he also says old faces. So I'm going to play now, everybody, Tegan. I'll raise you Tegan, and I'll raise you the Mara. And on top of that, okay, the cameo or the old face could be Susan. The Susan one, at some point, he's going to have to play back. But then whoever, say the old face might be Susan, then the cameo will be Tegan. It'll be one or the other. All right? I think Janet Fielding might be in it. Okay. But it does say on that last line, songs. And he does it in plural. There are 8 episodes in the series, and he has used the plural of songs. We had a song in church on Ruby Road, so you can only wonder. That's all I'm saying. Songs. Now that's where it gets madder. That's his definition, isn't it? Madder, wilder, breaking the rules. Shocks. Now, shocks. Is that Rogue or Susan? Possibilities there, you see. A shock. Now, a shock also I can see, being a cynical Doctor Who fan, having seen season 1, a shock could be breaks myth, breaks law, breaks canon. That's my other concern there. Okay. Now, he said he had shocks in series 1 with Sutek coming back. Now, that went well, didn't it? The ratings went well. The audiences didn't grow. So, there's some interesting points to be made about whether doing any of this RTD works. His version of what works for Doctor Who didn't work in season 1. And remember, they seem to think this is a new era. They seem to think that season 1 that you've just watched brought adventure, hope, optimism, and joy. Now, there were a lot of tears. Ruby found her mam. I mean, it was a soap opera. I wasn't quite sure where all that came into it. I mean, the joy is obviously Kamala Harris. We seem to always do whatever is said over there. The last paragraph here, if you just take a look at this links in with what he's just been saying. Because when he was talking about season 1, this is what he promised. And then you can see it's the same blooming game. And I think there's something so 2024 about the characters above, right? Which is Ruby and Shooty. I think they're young and they're passionate and blah, 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 right? But then he says, you have a chance to push everything in Doctor Who to its limits and its extremes with space babies and monsters and chases and satire and jokes and terror. Notice how much he lists very quickly, everybody. So I'll say it again. In Doctor Who, you can push to the extreme with space babies and monsters and chases and satire and jokes and terror. Right, have a little moment. What did you see in season 1 regarding satire? Does he mean Dot and Bubble? Or does he mean 73 yards on a far right politician. When he sees jokes, too many. When he says terror, where was the terror? Remind me of the terror. Was it the terror on Shooty's face when he saw Sutek? The space babies, well, I'm not saying a word. Monsters, well, there was the snot monster, the slugs. Sutek was a dog. I'm not quite sure. You see, that's what he promised. So when we see him saying that, just look at the list and look again at what we've seen and start to think, right, I don't like that word. Why has he got myth in there? Why has he got law in there? Is he going to break canon? That's what worries me when RTD says stuff. So you can see why I am onto it. So as we look at some of the quick trailer pictures, I've got some more quotations. I'll come to the thread and let's have a quick chit chat about what you've all been saying. Dalek Lives Matters. When he says beasts, does he mean Juno? Naughty. Shooty, don't say a word. Divine and Dragon, good to see you. My concern is that RTD will bring back classic elements, but given his penchant for deconstructing canon to suit his intents, I don't trust him to avoid damaging whatever he touches. I think from nearly everybody who's been on my thread over the year, most people would prefer he did not touch canon and moved forward. And I will give credit to Chris Chibnall in that first year. Didn't like it, but he did try and push forward. And you know, I think RTD is going too far plundering the past. Let's see what else we've got here from people. If there's a big question, I know there's no super chats, but you can ask if you put a Q or something. I'll see it very quickly. Lily Shambles, hiya. Giving people what they want. It's RTD, not going to happen anymore. The more he bigs things up, the more I worry. And you know what? I think it was on my By-Generates show. I think it was Rhys Roder said, and it was I think it was Rhys Roder. Sorry. The bigger the Doctor Who show goes, and we've just been looking at that superlative, it's in the wrong direction. The Doctor Who show needs to go smaller to feel bigger, was the point. Android invasion. You're trapped in a village. You're trapped on a sand miner. Go small. Doctor Who was always stronger, more vivid, more visceral when you went smaller and not en masse. When Doctor Who really does go bigger under the RTD era and with Disney's money, I feel as though we're trying to ape a big budget movie. I feel as though we're trying to ape Hollywood, and we've seen Doctor Who try and do that before, and it doesn't really work. Let's do what we're good at, and what I mean, what we're better at. Yeah, let's use that superlative. Doctor Who was so quintessentially British, so clever, so imaginative, so creative. Let's do that. You don't need money for that, actually. You just need some good writers. But we discussed that earlier tonight about the writers and about David Mullen. I know it's double shift. The trouble he has is that after series 1, he's been found out. This is my point, David. You know, I was much more open-minded before season 1. And the trouble is experience creates cynicism. And I've become more cynical or more critical in my inquiry. And I think that's a lot of us. Still open to being proven wrong. I mean, please prove me wrong and make this a belter of a show. I'm up for it. RTD loves to try to rewrite the past. He shouldn't go anywhere near established canon, but you know that he can't help himself. Paul, yep, I hear your pain. So let's continue with some of this. So he talks in the Doctor Who magazine about various sins, and I just want to show you a few snippets to remind you of what we've got coming in season 2, since that's what he mentioned in Doctor Who magazine. They're all flying around. There is an episode where it seems to be, I think he said everybody just about is ethnic. So that looks as though that could be that one. Ruby's back, of course. That looks an intriguing shot. I have to say, when you watch that in the trailer, that grabs me. They're all going up, by the way, gradually over the whole period. Yes, Belinda Chandra. Remember they were talking about there's a companion who doesn't want to be there. You know, that old chestnut. There they are in the water. There is one in the deep, isn't there? And we know there's one that's going to link to the spin-off. There's the robots, of course. There's Mrs. Flood, I think in the same cinema theatre as that cartoon that we see. And of course, is that the Daleks? Is that Gallifrey? All to be discussed later on. So let's get back to my analysis and what has been said. Now, of course, he's been offering us monsters and everything, but I just want to park this before we move on to another Russell T Davies quote. As Jane Tranter said last year, this is a new era, and the beauty of Doctor Who, she said, is that it can have this injection of freshness. The Doctor changes, the writers change, the showrunner changes, the producers change. Screeching of brakes. Because they were doing a lot of heavy work with the words regeneration and change last year. Right. The same showrunner as 2005. The producers, well, it's the same mob as 2005. The writers change, well, 50% of them is RTD, and now we've got some new ones in season 2. Season 1, we had Stephen Moffat as well. The Doctor changes, well, yeah, duh. And an injection of freshness. Well, the only freshness I've seen, if you want to argue that, is it's just gone to fantasy. And I know some people argue with me saying, Brendan, it's always changing. It's ever changing. You need to get rid of the script, like season 18, like season 7. Yeah, but it was still always Doctor Who. So anyway, just to point out there that while they're offering all these goodies for us, they seem to think there was a major change last year when actually a lot of us would argue it's the same people. So here's another element of what he said in the Doctor Who magazine that I want to analyze, and then I'll talk to the thread again. The studio will flare into life briefly, I hope, in February for a few days. Remember those specially shot trailers we did in the old days? I liked them. Maybe it's time to do that again. Do you know what? I've clipped his production notes into a slightly different order for emphasis, but can I just say, when you read his production notes, it seems to me, and they were written in January, this is the first time in 2 years he's had to stop. I'm sure he's worked hard, but it's the first time they've stopped. And what I'm starting to read in this quote and the two that are following is it's the first time he's got a chance to reflect and think and consider what should have been done, what could be done. And I really do think it's a key moment, this. I think there's some regrets here. I think he sounds wistful. I think, now let's unpack this a little bit more. First of all, it is clearly a regret. And why didn't they do it for season 1? When he talked about the trailers, the good old Chris Eccleston, do you want to come with me? Some of those great David Tennant ones, that David Tennant, that split screen with Martha Jones. Remember the really good, specially made trailers. You didn't get millions of clips, but you got a really clever trailer. I think he's regretting that they didn't do that last year. Now, it could be regret, and it could be, well, not quite the word desperation, but he could be thinking we need to up the promotion because it was flat for season 1. That's what I'm thinking here. What's everyone else thinking? David Mullen says the trailers sound like he realizes he needs more publicity. He needs to try and get people interested in talking. And let's be honest, let's really be honest, those Chris Eccleston ones were off the scale. I mean, we never even saw the shot with the flame. I thought that was going to be a clip from the program, the flame chasing him. It looked gritty. It looked full of jeopardy. It looked exciting. It looked actually movie and cinema quality. And that wasn't even a clip from the program. I think he's now taken a breath after a manic 2 years, specials, spin-offs, 2 seasons, the lot. And he's now realizing we said this was the problem. If you put 2 seasons together like this, even if he's thinking in bed bit by bit by bit, he can't turn the juggernaut round. He needed that thinking time, but he seems to be thinking now. It looks like me and David are thinking the same thing. Let's have a look. Action Popcast, good to see you. Brendan, do you think him reflecting will actually bring any positive change? I think it can only affect really stuff like this, publicity. I don't think he's got the possibility now to change anything bigger. He will have changed one or two things in the writing as they go through, because everybody's thinking, when I've had a bad lesson, the next time I have that class, I've done some thinking about how I do things differently. And I think he can do that. It's just been slightly self-critical, but not change the whole game. And that's the problem. Because I think one of the own goals is to go fantasy. And of course, how does he change that? He's gone big on fantasy for 2 years. The pantheon of gods, the lot. I mean, he's not changing that, is he? And on, he thinks that his only issue is lack of publicity, when the only issue that is that no amount of publicity will make people watch all this garbage. Simon Anthony, you said you might be up. A trailer is not what you mentioned. We had a pre-story. A trailer is clips from the program. Yeah, that might be the definition. You know what I mean, though. Yeah, a publicity little film. And that Chris Eccleston one was good, with some trailered clips, of course, within it, wasn't it? It's a nice little package. Lee Smith, well, that's publicity for you. Let's have a look now. Okay, let's look further into this. Now, the studio will flare into life briefly, I hope in February for a few days. It sounds as though he's not quite in charge of that aspect. It sounds as though if he had his own way, he would actually do the Chris Eccleston style publicity. But obviously he needs to get other people to do that. So I will give some credit here that there's been some thinking, but I think also on top of that, there's been some kickback. And I also think there's a realization that they need to do something different. I think they went careering from the special. I think they assumed the specials would just do, it's got David Tennant, Catherine Tate, so that will just happen as an event. As soon as they then kicked quite quickly into Church on Ruby Road, yeah, there was a bit of publicity there, but I think they got the way of attacking it wrong. They did the same with Jodie Whittaker. They went too on the feminine and the female music and everything, and they got it wrong. David Mullen, bear in mind how Moffat failed the Capaldi era by abandoning the trailers and slick marketing he used with Smith. That cost the series badly. Yeah, I remember the early trailers going through, and then I don't remember them. So I think it's making your point. Simon Anthony, the pantheon of gods could indeed be a set of powerful aliens which humans saw and remember as myth. We can hope. The trouble is, he's already said this, Simon, that he can make it wilder and madder, because the pantheon of gods means the Doctor faces a universe with no rules that he recognizes. I hate that. You know how I hated Q in Star Trek? It just doesn't work for me. So I detect from this regret, wistfulness, and maybe the pause is a little bit too late. Now, when it comes to this quotation, but there's a proper excitement building amongst the team as the season approaches. The shot in the Christmas trailer, the last shot of all the Doctor flying or falling or tumbling, one shot in the middle of the most astonishing sequence. Now, I'll say one thing straight away, to be fair. Aren't we sick? Aren't we sick of RTD and the publicity team going on about a sequence or a scene? Can we have, please, them discussing, wait till you see this whole storyline. Wait till you see this story. That's my problem. We're not talking about stories. We're talking about one moment. And as I said in the earlier stream tonight, my concern when I watched Silver Nemesis all those years ago was it was a series of stunt sequences, but there was no development. There was no cohesion. And I think this is the problem here. He seems to be hoping that we are grabbed by a moment. Well, I'm sorry, but it needs to be more than that now. Silent Witness, Wallace and Gromit can give us a full program. That's the sequence he's talking about, just in case you're just racking your brains. It says, is he falling? Is he tumbling? Okay. So yeah, he's tricking us, and we know they could have played with a camera, so he could be going in the opposite direction. There's a whole load of things that could be going on there. But as he says, there's a lot of excitement because you see the Doctor flying or falling or tumbling, one shot in the middle of the most astonishing sequence. Right, it's a sequence, but I need more than that. Do you? Adrian Sherlock, good to see you. Doctor Who nowadays should be doing stories that reflect events like Ukraine and Gaza. We said earlier in our earlier stream, please catch it if you missed it. We had a big discussion about you could mention many contemporary issues, but a good science fiction writer wouldn't name them. It's too literal. Take it off this planet, completely different names. I mean, Warriors of the Deep, which was set on Earth, of course, in the future, it was clearly the Soviet bloc and the Western bloc, wasn't it? But you take it away. Come on, where's the escapism? We don't want to get bogged down with there's a story about Ukraine, there's a story about Gaza, but we'll get the analogy, we'll get the allegory, and Will Farm did that very well. So I get your point, Adrian. I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm just saying, can we have clever writing, though, that gives the parallel to that if you want to see it, but it's not rammed down people's thoughts. Lee Smith is panicking about the zero gravity. I know. The only thing I'll hope for, there is hope somewhere in here, is I think Simon Anthony has said it a few times, I think, on my stream. Let's hope the bi-generation was a master plan, 2 years of fantasy, and then it's wrapped up again and we're back to normal. I personally think that's a massive risk of RTD to do that. But that might help with the zero gravity nonsense, Lee Smith, that eventually it all goes away and we can actually have Bobby Ewing come out the shower and we're back to normal. Divining Dragon. I think Simon Anthony had a good observation, and were the stories promoted in Doctor Who good, I'd feel hope, but RTD's track record leaves me despondent. I think hoping for publicity now is a problem, isn't it? It's not the publicity, it's the actual scripts. Paul Bowler, RTD seems in reflective mood. I think so. I'm not sure if even a hyped publicity media blitz can stoke enough interest for season 2. I think that's where we all are. I really do think this is the problem. Very, very concerning. Higher timescales. I think you're still in Japan, aren't you? Wow, Bad Wolf really did turn out to be bad. Not eating kids like the big bad wolf, but sexually indoctrinating them instead. You may say that. I will not comment. Julian, I'm just trying to get up there. I want to know more about Morris. He's cute and all, but who is he? What's his story? I suppose we'll all find out. Lee Smith, well, a few episodes might be decent. I haven't got the slide. I had it on earlier, but of course, the one in the deep does look all right. I like that shot, and it just looks tasty. Sorry, that's my personal opinion. The robots look clunky. Yeah. And yes, you're right, Adrian. The Daleks and Thals were a World War II situation, but we didn't have it rammed down our throats. It was just an amazing allegory for it, wasn't it? It was absolutely great. So there you go. He was referring to that. Now, here's my next quote from RTD. There's a few put together here just to further brevity. He started the production notes in the magazine saying, it's very quiet. It's been quite a run. And this is where I think it's, you can appreciate it, whether we like what he's done or not, that he's actually suddenly had a moment to go, cup of tea, what were those 2 years all about? And then, God, it's the moment you look in the mirror and you think, oh my God, did I really get the decisions right mostly? The other thing is, we've all seen the streams, and I've referred to it, where the Bad Wolf Studios partly have been advertising some of their space. And some streamers have gone to town and said, this is the end, Bad Wolf are over, and I'm not as triggered as that because the studios are enormous and they can have a discovery of witches, industry, and concurrent different ones going on. So they might just have space at the moment because actually Doctor Who isn't filming at the moment, and they're not even filming the Christmas special. So hello, there is some space. It may not be the Doctor Who space. So when he says it's quiet, unusual for Doctor Who, it's been quite a run. I can hear somebody being knackered there. I really can. Then he talks about hurtling through what's chilled. Let me just get this bigger for you. Hurtling through what's called the First Order, 3 specials, 2 seasons of 16 episodes, a spin-off, 26 episodes in total. It's the verb hurtling that's doing the hard work for me. I can see the numbers and we've all added it up, right? But when he says for the last 2 seasons and 26 episodes, they've been hurtling, I think for a production crew, after it, after it was trying to pick up a franchise that was limping after Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall, I think hurtling is not the word I want. Because hurtling sounds as though you're not in control. Hurtling sounds as though you've been going at speed for the sake of looking as though you're going at speed. We've all worked with those people who walk around the school, walk around the office fast to look busy. But that doesn't mean you're thinking. And that doesn't mean you're analysing. And that doesn't mean you're doing your job properly. So the word hurtling bothers me. Because 26 episodes of the Hooniverse needs to be good after Chris Chibnall and after Jodie Whittaker. And I think that's what the BBC wanted. And I think that's what the Disney were hoping for. And hurtling, what do you think? I think hurtling sounds a bit worrying to me. You see what I mean? If you look at those production notes quickly, you don't think much. I didn't think much. And I know some streams tonight have just mentioned the brightness bit. You look at some of the words, and I think we've got a man who's regretting, a man who's starting to really have time to think, a man who wants the tactics different out of desperation, and a man who's actually subconsciously admitting they went at a hair-neck speed, and that's maybe not good. So, as Dalek Zilla says, I know it's so ironic, isn't it? Doesn't he look tired? Adrian, RTD has had a double failure. Wrong topics done with the wrong approach, and maybe the wrong writers. I mean, Rogue, was that really good, Doctor Who? As Simon Anthony says, picking up on that word, hurtling, because they simply don't have availability of shooty. They didn't have to pick an actor who's not always available. They didn't. Richard Brown, hurtling, slapdash. Lee Smith, hurling. Shall I say time turds? Get it over and done with. Yes, Action Popcast, please get in contact with me. Doctor Who should be like a bag of revels. Oh my God, we're going back a bit. You expect the old orange and coffee, but not the whole bag. I'll stop with the chocolate analogies now. Yeah, you're going to get me. I can't eat now before bed. As David Mullen says, if there's no Christmas special for 2025, that's not good. It's not good at all. Except I will say it is, because I didn't like the church on Ruby Road. I thought it was insignificant, it was silly, and it was a waste of budget, and it was a waste of Doctor Who precious episode. And the one we've just had, Joy to the World, wasn't really Doctor Who either. And if you took that budget for those 2 episodes that are wunderbar Christmas episodes and just made a 9th episode in season 1 and a 9th episode in season 2, I'd have preferred that if they were more substantial. Because as soon as they say it's a Christmas episode, they go light, frothy, insignificant, inconsequential, and absolutely blooming silly. I'd prefer them not to waste the money, I'll be honest with you. So it's been quite a run, hurtling through. And then the last bit there, he says, shooting them felt like forever. It felt like 10 seconds. Now, we've all been there, haven't we? In some ways, the year feels long, and in some years, the year feels short. Again, it gives you a hint that you have that feeling when you're going, oh my God, oh my God. And I really do think there is an awful lot of, now I can breathe, or now let's get this sorted out. And there may be, as you know, there's been 1 or 2 whispers that maybe he's allowed to sell season 2. He's allowed to be the showrunner and the front runner there. But after season 2, since the rumors about Disney aren't hot, the rumors about RTD aren't hot, that actually maybe this is just his last hurrah before we really have to have a damn good sit down, the BBC, Bad Wolf and RTD, and say, right, showrunner changes. They did it with Chibnall. I'm interested. I think there's a little bit more, because some of his comments when he slows down sound a little bit sad. Right. So if we just have a look at what he said, he reminder, this is from May last year. It's such a public role and you're adored by children. That's a very specific and unusual thing. Now, I understand that something I've done might have touched someone's heart and made them feel safe or less lonely. Now, this is Davies talking about the role of Doctor Who. And remember, a lot of us have been worrying about the content, some of the dialogue, And of course, he's talking about this being a decent space for kids. And on top of that, this is the final one. We live in heavy times. Oh, he goes on about that so much. I want people of all ages, frankly, to turn from the news and to turn from whatever aggression there is online and to come to a nice, safe space. Is that Doctor Who? Is Doctor Who's season 1 Rogue a safe space? Is season 1, well, pre-season 1, is the Star Beast a safe space? And I'm only asking the question because if parents didn't like some of the content and found it was challenging how they were bringing up their kids, then the conclusion will be from the British public and beyond, it's not a nice, safe space. So what RTD is saying he wanted for Doctor Who, he didn't deliver. Because I do wonder whether the ideology is pushing ahead of his common sense about what makes a good showrunner, what makes Doctor Who. So if I just kind of tidy up here and bring in Action Podcast, the big budget means nothing with a rubbish script. Look at the old days, spray painted bubble wrap and great stories we were hooked on. Well, exactly, and that was my point. And that's what Rhys said the other day. The bigger Doctor Who goes, the smaller it gets. It just means nothing with a reset button. But the smaller Doctor Who gets, the bigger the impact and the bigger the story and the bigger it's. I mean, come on, go to the Robots of Death. You're on a sand miner. There's only, about 7 or 8 of the crew and a fair few robots. But what happens on that sand miner will affect the whole of civilization. That's what Doctor Who does well. But Chris Boucher knew what he was doing, didn't he? And that's another issue. My argument is you don't have to be a science fiction writer to write for Doctor Who, and many in the past weren't. What you do have to be is an experienced television writer. I think Doctor Who deserves it. I don't think you need to be practicing this. Maybe there was a time when that happened with Doctor Who. That time has gone. Okay. Adrian Sherlock, RTD has destroyed his career. I think that truism that you should never go back, he's living through. I really don't think, for his own sake, he should have gone back. He couldn't have beaten it, really, could he? I have to say, when he left at the end of the David Tennant era, he ended on a very big high. And I have to say, I wouldn't have touched Doctor Who with a barge pole after that, would you? How could you come back? Fair enough, he's a Doctor Who fan, and his love for the programme means he will come back. And there's some ego, of course, which is, I can bail it out after Chris Chibnall. The trouble is, Chris Chibnall could quietly think, actually, you haven't done anything decent here since Dalekzilla. They need to just let the series die, and maybe during this hiatus, we can get a big budget film. We're going back to the 90s, aren't we? We're going back, and this is what I mean, we're going back 30 years. It's like, it's frightening, really, because it's a long time, and we're not getting young. We're not getting any younger. That's what I'm trying to say. Lee Smith, Doctor Who is like a Christmas advent calendar that has mouldy chockies behind each door. Oh, them woke calendars. Did you see some of them that when you open them, there's nothing behind and it teaches the kids that you don't always get what you want? David Mullen, if the Disney money for series now is spent, then there will be no one paying for the studio at the moment. Can you leave the TARDIS set up if there's no immediate orders for another series? In the Doctor Who magazine, David, he says you can hear the TARDIS set. What he was saying is it's creaking and it's just in shadow. And he was hoping that in February, it might be in this week or next week, if he's had his own way, the publicity will ramp up and they'll do a few days filming in that TARDIS and other things. So it's all set up. It hasn't gone away. So those rumours or that advertising space that Bad Wolf did is not quite the same fact that I think people are conflating things, and I'm not being alarmist and I'm not being triggered. If you really think it through, I think they've got a lot of studio space. Maybe some of the studio space they used for Doctor Who clearly isn't being used, but the TARDIS is still intact. Paul, watching the show now feels like forever, and it's getting shorter. I mean, it does feel like forever. I've done a year of these streams, and I get more and more depressed. Action Popcast. The big budget means nothing with a crap script. Look at the old. Oh, sorry, Action Popcast. I'm actually repeating. Lily Shambles. Used to love watching the Christmas specials with the kids. Good for you. I didn't like them. They won't touch it now. I think one of them watched the first couple of them. Yeah. Of the Jodie episodes, he said, but nothing since. And I saw another quote tonight about that people are turning away. Kids are turning away. I know that from school. Kids weren't interested in Doctor Who. I remember in my last year of teaching, which is only a year or so back, one of the kids, because I remember I was the head of year, one of the kids, when they were walking with me, they said, "What is that Star Wars?" And I was going, "What? What?" It was a Dalek. It was a picture of a Dalek, and I said, "Is that from Star Wars?" And I went, "Oh my God, it's a Dalek from 1963." And they're saying, "Is it Star Wars?" That's how far disconnected we now have the younger generation. That kid was 12. So who is he pitching at? I do not know. Let's have a look. Adrian Sherlock doing a good shift tonight. Davies went back with the run attitude. He seemed to be self-indulgent and acted like he had nothing to learn. I do think there's some hubris going on here. I do. I don't want that to be true, because it's just sad for him on a personal basis and on a professional basis. And it's sad for us, for our program. I want none of these things to be true. But I think there's some hubris going on, because he was quite worried and careful in his first era. Look at the interviews. Look how cautious he was regarding how he structured that first season. If you don't like the spacey second one with Lady Cassandra, which some might find silly because it's silly aliens, blue skin, Lady Cassandra, all that stuff, I'll have a history one with Charles Dickens. If not, we'll have one on present day Earth with the Slovene. He was couching it carefully. And then he had some populist things in with Big Brother and The Weakest Link. I think since then, obviously it took off with David Tennant, and as you know, with merchandise and everything, it was phenomenal. Now, what a time to just leave the show. His writer's tale did well too. But I think what's happened now is he's come back. Obviously, he's been writing other stuff, and some of it's got plaudits, like It's a Sin. I think he's come back. He's seen that his mate has had the show limping. Oh, it's a big person to think, whether it's your mate or not, that you are the person who can bail out a limping franchise. I can do it. Really? I'll be honest with you. You know what I've been like about RTD, but I will blame the BBC. The BBC clearly didn't interview him. What they did is beg him. And he listed Sutek, robots, Daleks, and he listed enough stuff that he was going to slot into season 1 and 2, where they went, "Oh yeah, oh wow, he's got it all sorted." And as you know, he makes stuff up and deals with it later, like the 4 knocks. I think they didn't properly interview him, but we all know there were other people who offered to do the job, Babylon creator, who weren't asked. So the BBC is at fault. They didn't ask 3 people. They didn't put out for tender. They didn't say, "Come here, we'll interview you." I went for a job once at a school where I had already done the same job and been very successful. I was put out because the second time they didn't give it to me. That's fascinating, that, isn't it? I actually turned around an English department. I got the results up by 200%. Years later, with more experience, when I went for the same role, a bit more money, and made the title sound a bit bigger, but it was the same role. They didn't give it to me. Now, I often thought, what the hell? And I still thought it was a stupid measure. Well, I would. But they didn't give it to me because it was out to tender. There were loads of people interviewed. Why wasn't RTD actually questioned in a harder way the second time? Obviously, the answer can only be they were panicking after the Chibnall era, and they needed what they thought was a safe pair of hands to take over. It's all I can think of. Because why would you, with those millions and the millions coming from Disney, so there's a lot of power here, would you sit down and go, right, play the BBC executive game? Right, we've got questions. You've done it once. You were very successful. Well done, RTD. But what's going to be done different or the same? And why will it work this time when it didn't for Chris Chibnall and for the latter Stephen Moffat? Please explain. Because things have happened since David Tennant. They got another male, Capaldi, but somehow it didn't work. So the BBC need to ask harder questions. And he wasn't asked any of these questions, was he? Because he hasn't been given us the answers. I haven't seen any answers in season 1 that makes any sense. Julian says, I don't expect the Daleks to come back. I really don't want the Daleks to come back. My God, please, please, please. Paul, I hate the fact that the Daleks are now seemingly fully owned by the BBC. Yeah, Philip Morris hinted at that on our channel 2 weeks ago. I shudder to think what they'll do with them next. Well, forget about them, hopefully. Simon Anthony, we can ditch the Sutek problem by pointing out Sutek lied. We're all desperately hoping for some weird thing where it's a parallel universe or some nonsense now, aren't we? Jack Thursby, thanks for joining us. RTD is weak and rolled over for his activist bosses and colleagues. He also saw the pension pot, didn't he? That's what he saw. He saw something that was very, very tasty. Well, I've done 2 streams today. I did 2 streams on Friday. I'm streaming like a good one. And on Monday, that is actually tomorrow, or in a few minutes' time, I will be doing another live stream, but not on Doctor Who. We need a non-Doctor Who moment, don't we? It'll be Talking TV with Boomer Doug. And we will be discussing how did television actually teach us anything? Now, we do it as a wider way. I mean, it could teach you that you need to sit on the floor very near the buttons so that you're in charge of the telly. That's how you could say you learned that. But we're doing that live, 1 p.m. tomorrow. It'd be lovely to have a nice nostalgia chat about TV. What did TV teach you? Bad habits, good habits? Did it teach us anything? Okay, so it's been a fascinating day, fascinating talk. It's been nice to kind of just wrap up the day with you all here. Hope it's been worthwhile joining me twice over. Join us again tomorrow. Bigenerates on Wednesday with Cinnamon. Plenty going on, and we've really enjoyed your company. Check you've subscribed, check you've given us a like, and check us out at 1 p.m. tomorrow. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us, and have a good night.